Imagine this. You are standing in a dimly lit room filled with antique mirrors. Each one reflects a slightly different version of yourself. Taller, shorter, younger, older. Some reflections are flattering, others unsettling. You reach out to touch one, and your hand passes right through. These are not solid reflections, but fleeting images, illusions cast by unseen forces. You realize, with a growing unease, that you have been navigating this room, making decisions based on these insubstantial reflections, mistaking them for reality. This room, with its deceptive mirrors, is the realm of modern relationships. The reflections are the curated online profiles, the carefully chosen words, the performed personas we encounter in our quest for connection. And the unseen forces? They are the complex interplay of societal expectations, ingrained gender roles, and the primal drives that fuel attraction. The disturbing truth, the one that often remains unspoken, is that within this intricate dance, a subtle yet profound form of deception can take root, not necessarily born of malicious intent, but often as a survival mechanism, a response to the very dynamics of the game itself. Consider the initial stages of attraction. What draws you in? Is it solely the authentic essence of the other person, or is it a carefully constructed presentation, a highlighting of desirable traits, a subtle veiling of perceived flaws? Think about the pressure women often face to be perpetually appealing, to embody a certain ideal of beauty and desirability. How might this pressure manifest in their interactions, not as a conscious lie, but as a strategic presentation of self-designed to elicit a specific response? Reflect on the language of courtship, the compliments, the displays of interest, the subtle mirroring of your own values and desires. Are these always genuine expressions of an inner landscape? Or can they sometimes be tactical maneuvers, unconscious or otherwise, aimed at securing attention and commitment? It's not about questioning every interaction, but about acknowledging the inherent complexities and the potential for subtle misdirection. What about the unspoken power dynamics that often exist? Society still, in many ways, conditions men to be the pursuers, the initiators. This dynamic can inadvertently create a space where the pursued holds a certain power. A power that can be wielded subtly, sometimes unconsciously, through the careful management of attention and affection. It's not about blame, but about understanding the inherent imbalances that can lead to these subtle forms of deception. Have you ever felt that you were being subtly tested, that your reactions were being observed and analyzed, not necessarily with overt judgment, but as a way to gauge your suitability? What if these tests, these subtle challenges, are not always about genuine compatibility, but about assessing your willingness to invest, your level of commitment, even your potential for future provision and protection? Think about the emotional landscape of relationships. Men are often socialized to suppress their emotions, to project an image of strength and control. When a woman expresses vulnerability, it can be a powerful tool for connection, eliciting empathy and a desire to protect. But what if this vulnerability is sometimes strategically deployed, not from a place of genuine openness, but as a means of influencing your actions or securing your emotional investment? Consider the long-term implications. What happens when the initial allure fades, when the carefully constructed presentations begin to crumble? Do you find yourself facing a reality that differs significantly from the initial image? Have you ever felt that the person you committed to was not entirely who they presented themselves to be in the beginning? The disturbing truth is not that all women are intentionally deceptive. It is far more nuanced and unsettling than that. It is that the very nature of attraction, the societal pressures placed upon women, and the inherent power dynamics within relationships can create a fertile ground for subtle forms of deception, a strategic presentation of self, an unconscious manipulation of emotional cues, a careful navigation of expectations that can leave men feeling confused, betrayed, and ultimately questioning the very foundations of trust. Why is this truth so difficult to confront? Perhaps because it shatters the romantic ideal, the notion of effortless connection based on pure authenticity. Perhaps because it forces men to confront their own vulnerabilities and their own roles in these dynamics. Perhaps because it suggests that the game of love is far more complex and strategic than we are often led to believe. What if the key to navigating this complex landscape lies not in suspicion or cynicism, but in a deeper understanding of these underlying forces? The hidden problem of deception, psychological and philosophical roots. The subtle deception we speak of doesn't typically stem from conscious malice, but rather from a complex interplay of psychological needs, societal conditioning, and even a primal drive for security and survival. To understand its roots, we must delve into the depths of human psychology and touch upon philosophical perspectives that illuminate the often unspoken dynamics between the sexes. Consider the Jungian concept of the persona, the social mask we wear, the image we present to the world. While a necessary aspect of social interaction, the persona can become a form of deception when it eclipses the authentic self. For women, societal pressures to be agreeable, nurturing, and desirable can lead to a carefully crafted persona that prioritizes these traits, sometimes at the expense of their deeper, more complex selves. This isn't necessarily a deliberate act of manipulation, but rather a learned behavior, a way of navigating a world that often judges them based on these superficial qualities. Friedrich Nietzsche's ideas on power dynamics are also relevant here. In any relationship, there exists a subtle dance of power, a constant negotiation of needs and desires. In a society where traditional gender roles often place men in positions of perceived power, economic, social, women may unconsciously develop strategies to navigate this imbalance, to exert influence in more subtle, indirect ways. This isn't about domination, but about finding agency within a pre-existing power structure. The deception lies in the veiling of this strategic maneuvering, often presented as mere intuition or emotional expression. Arthur Schopenhauer's pessimistic view of human motivation, driven by the relentless will to life, can offer another lens. From this perspective, all actions, including those within relationships, are ultimately driven by self-interest, even if masked by altruism or romantic ideals. The desire for partnership, for security, for procreation. These fundamental drives can subtly shape behavior, leading individuals to present themselves in ways that maximize their chances of achieving these goals. The deception, then, becomes a byproduct of this inherent self-interest, a tailoring of the self to meet the perceived needs and desires of a potential partner. Aldous Huxley, in his exploration of social conditioning, highlighted how societal norms and expectations can deeply influence individual behavior. Women are often bombarded with messages about what it means to be a good woman, a desirable partner. These messages, internalized from a young age, can shape their interactions in ways that may appear deceptive from a purely authentic standpoint. They may learn to prioritize certain behaviors, to suppress others, not out of a desire to mislead, but as a result of deeply ingrained social programming. Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy of existentialism emphasizes the freedom and responsibility of the individual, but also the inherent anxiety of confronting this freedom. In relationships, this anxiety can manifest as a desire to create a stable, predictable dynamic. This can sometimes lead to the adoption of certain roles or behaviors that are not entirely authentic, but serve to create a sense of security and control. The deception arises when these adopted roles are mistaken for the true self. Viktor Frankl's focus on the search for meaning can also provide insight. Individuals seek meaning and purpose in their lives, and relationships often play a significant role in this search. The desire to be loved, to be valued, to build a shared future can be a powerful motivator, sometimes leading individuals to present an idealized version of themselves, a version they believe will be more likely to fulfill this need for meaning and connection in their partner's eyes. The hidden problem, therefore, is not simply about individual acts of deception, but about a complex web of psychological needs, philosophical underpinnings, and societal pressures that can subtly shape the dynamics of male-female relationships. It's about the personas we adopt, the power dynamics we navigate, the inherent self-interest that drives us, the social conditioning we internalize, the existential anxieties we grapple with, and the search for meaning that guides our actions. This hidden force affects human behavior by creating a landscape of subtle performances, unspoken expectations, and carefully managed impressions. It influences our emotions by creating a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something is not quite right, even when there is no concrete evidence of wrongdoing. It shapes our identity by forcing us to constantly interpret and react to these subtle cues, leading to self-doubt and a questioning of our own perceptions. Effects on trust, relationships, and self-identity. The unseen consequences of our flawed understanding of consciousness permeate every aspect of our lives, shaping our fears, our desires, and our very sense of identity. The fear of death, amplified by our belief in its finality, casts a long shadow over our existence, fueling our anxieties and driving our desperate attempts to cling to life. This fear manifests in our obsession with material possessions, our relentless pursuit of status and power, our desperate attempts to leave a legacy that will outlive our mortal bodies. We build empires, write books, and create art, all in a futile attempt to cheat death, to carve our names into the stone of eternity. Our denial of death also distorts our relationships, fostering a sense of isolation and disconnection. We treat others as objects, as means to an end, rather than as fellow travelers on the same perilous journey. We build walls around ourselves, afraid to open our hearts, to expose our vulnerability, lest we be reminded of our own mortality. The illusion of a separate self, reinforced by our materialist worldview, breeds a sense of alienation from the natural world. We see ourselves as masters of the universe, entitled to exploit and dominate the planet, oblivious to the interconnectedness of all living things. This arrogance, this delusion of separateness, is driving us towards ecological catastrophe, a self-inflicted apocalypse that threatens to extinguish all life on Earth. Our cognitive biases, our ingrained patterns of thought, further reinforce our denial of death. We cling to comforting narratives, to wishful thinking, to magical beliefs, anything to stave off the chilling reality of our mortality. We surround ourselves with distractions, with noise and activity, anything to avoid the unsettling silence of our own inner being. Neurologically, the brain is wired for survival, programmed to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This survival instinct, amplified by our fear of death, drives us to seek out experiences that provide temporary relief from our existential angst. We become addicted to sensation, to stimulation, to the fleeting highs of dopamine, anything to numb the pain of our mortality. Culturally, we have created a death-denying society, a culture that celebrates youth, beauty, and vitality, while shunning old age, decay, and death. We hide our dead, embalm our bodies, and sanitize our graveyards, anything to avoid confronting the raw, visceral reality of our mortality. This denial, this avoidance, This relentless flight from death ultimately robs us of the very essence of life. We live in fear, in anxiety, in a constant state of unease, unable to fully embrace the present moment, to savor the fleeting beauty of existence. We are like ghosts, haunting our own lives, forever trapped in the shadow of our mortality. The unseen consequence, then, is not simply the fear of death, but the death of life itself. We are living half-lives, trapped in a cage of our own making, unable to experience the full spectrum of human existence. And until we break free from this cage, until we confront our mortality with courage and honesty, we will remain forever imprisoned by our own fear. How to break free from deception. Breaking free from the subtle deceptions woven into the fabric of modern relationships requires a radical shift in perspective, a conscious rebellion against ingrained societal norms and unconscious patterns of interaction. It demands a move away from the superficiality of curated personas and towards the vulnerability of authentic self-expression. This rebellion is not about aggression or cynicism, but about cultivating a deeper awareness and adopting counterintuitive strategies that foster genuine connection. The first step in this rebellion is cultivating radical self-awareness. This involves a deep and honest introspection, a willingness to examine your own motivations, insecurities, and the ways in which you might be inadvertently contributing to these deceptive dynamics. Ask yourself, what are my own expectations in a relationship? Are they realistic and based on genuine connection, or are they influenced by societal myths and idealized notions? What aspects of myself do I present, and what do I conceal, and why? Understanding your own role in the relational dance is crucial for recognizing and challenging the subtle deceptions of others. Next, embrace the power of authentic vulnerability. In a world that often equates masculinity with stoicism and emotional suppression, choosing to be genuinely open and vulnerable can be a revolutionary act. This doesn't mean oversharing or dwelling on negativity, but rather being willing to express your true feelings, needs, and fears, even when it feels uncomfortable. This act of authentic self-disclosure creates space for genuine connection and makes it more difficult for others to maintain a deceptive facade. When you lead with vulnerability, you invite authenticity in return. Challenge societal narratives and ingrained gender roles. Question the traditional expectations placed on both men and women in relationships. Reject the notion that men must always be the pursuers and providers, and that women must always be. The culmination of this exploration leads us to a truth so profound, so deceptively simple, that it often remains obscured by the complexities of our relational dances. The ultimate truth, the final realization that shatters the illusion of subtle female deception in the way men often perceive it, is this: the deception you perceive is often a reflection of a deeper, more universal human struggle. The struggle for safety, validation, and connection in a world that often feels inherently unsafe and uncertain. What appears as a deliberate act of misleading can often be traced back to a primal yearning for security. Emotional, social, and sometimes even physical. Think about the societal conditioning women face from a young age. They are often taught to be agreeable, to prioritize the needs of others, to navigate social situations with a heightened awareness of potential danger or judgment. This conditioning can lead to the development of subtle strategies for self-protection and for eliciting desired responses, not from a place of inherent deceitfulness, but from a learned need to navigate a complex and often unforgiving social landscape. Consider the vulnerability inherent in seeking intimacy. To truly open oneself to another person is to risk rejection, judgment, and heartbreak. The subtle deceptions we've discussed can sometimes be seen as defense mechanisms, unconscious attempts to control the narrative, to present an image that feels safer and more likely to be accepted. It's a paradoxical situation. The very act of trying to secure connection can sometimes create a barrier to genuine intimacy. Furthermore, the desire for validation is a fundamental human need. In a world that often places immense pressure on women to conform to certain ideals of beauty, success, and behavior, the need for external validation can be particularly strong. The curated online profiles, the carefully chosen words, these can be seen as attempts to gain that validation, to feel seen and valued. While these presentations may not always be entirely authentic, they often stem from a deep-seated yearning for acceptance rather than a conscious desire to deceive. The truth no man wants to hear, perhaps, is not that women are inherently deceptive, but that the dynamics of power, vulnerability, and societal pressure often create a relational landscape where subtle forms of maneuvering become almost inevitable for both genders. Men, too, engage in their own forms of strategic presentation, often downplaying vulnerabilities or exaggerating strengths in the pursuit of success and attraction. The disturbing way a woman might seem to deceive is often a mirror reflecting the anxieties and insecurities present within the broader human experience of seeking connection. The paradigm shift lies in recognizing that the focus on deception itself can be a distraction from the deeper issue. The need for greater authenticity, vulnerability, and mutual understanding in our relationships. Instead of viewing these subtle maneuvers as malicious acts, consider them as signals, indicators of underlying fears, unmet needs, and the pressures of navigating a complex social world. True liberation in relationships comes not from suspicion or accusation, but from creating a space where both individuals feel safe enough to shed their protective layers, to be truly seen and accepted for who they are, imperfections and all. This requires a commitment to honest and empathetic communication, a willingness to challenge societal expectations, and a recognition that vulnerability is not a weakness, but the very foundation of genuine intimacy. The ultimate truth, then, is not about uncovering a hidden female agenda, but about acknowledging our shared human vulnerability and the ways in which we all navigate the complexities of connection. It's about moving beyond the surface-level performances and striving for a deeper understanding of the underlying needs and motivations that drive our behavior. It's about recognizing that the disturbing way we perceive deception in others might just be a distorted reflection of our own fears and the universal human struggle to find love and belonging in an often uncertain world. Let this realization not breed cynicism, but rather a profound sense of empathy and a renewed commitment to building relationships based on radical honesty, authentic vulnerability, and a shared understanding of the human condition. The mirrors in that dimly lit room can only deceive if we mistake the reflections for reality. The power lies in recognizing the illusion and seeking the genuine connection that lies beyond the surface.